Hey y'all, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Taya and this is Taya's Turning Pages. So by the title of this video, you can tell that this is going to be a video where I talk about the books that I would like to reread again for the very first time. So all of these books are like kind of a hodgepodge of genres and just things from my past, like my childhood, but also just books that I recently read or that I read in the past couple of years. So yeah, there are quite a few books to get through. My camera is also dying yet again, so let's just get started. The trilogy or series that I would like to reread again for the first time is the Hunger Games series by Suzanne Collins. So just like how some people are really obsessed with Harry Potter or obsessed with the Twilight Saga, I am obsessed with the Hunger Games series. I don't care if it's YA, I don't care if it came out years ago, it is still one of my favorite, books of all time. I remember when this first debuted back in 2008, which feels like a lifetime ago. I think I was in middle school when the first book was published, and I remember, being very hesitant and not really wanting to read it, but my neighbor, shout out to Sam, she actually put me onto this book and I was hooked, and I knew from the very first book I was going to want to continue the series. And honestly, reading it and watching the movies come to life, like, in the theater on the big screen, were both experiences within itself. I remember where I was when, I was reading the new books, coming out, but also just getting to go to the movie theater and be surrounded by other fans of the Hunger Games and getting to watch the movies. And it was great. I still think Catching Fire is one of the best book to movie adaptations of all time. They did a phenomenal job with that one. The costume design was crazy. It was so good. It was great. Like the effects, the CGI, like everything was just phenomenal. It was so good. Even the plot itself was, I just think, a little bit more interesting, because of course the first book was more of a setup, and then with the second book coming out, that was more of like, okay, this is when shit is really hitting the fan. So yeah, I loved all of them though, to be honest. I know a lot of people didn't really care for Mockingjay, and a lot of people actually didn't even care for the prequel that just came out recently, which is called the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and that book actually focuses on President Snow, so the main antagonist in the Hunger Games trilogy. I actually enjoyed that book, but going back to the actual trilogy itself, yes, loved it, to the point where I even got a Hunger Games tattoo on my ankle, and I will put a picture of it up on the screen here. It is a bow and arrow tattoo, of course, an ode to Katniss. She is like one of my favorite characters and female characters of all time. So yes, I can't say enough great things about the trilogy. If you have not read the Hunger Games yet, or if it came out before you were born, I definitely recommend just picking up the series and giving it a read. It is so good. One of the best dystopian, settings and novels, period, in my opinion. I actually have like a whole little section on my bookshelf dedicated to the Hunger Games, and I'll put some B-roll in here just so that way you guys can see it. But yes, I'm a Hunger Games stan. I don't care what anyone says. And quickly going back to the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I liked it. I thought it was interesting. I liked getting to know more about President Snow, even though I still hate him with a burning passion. I was so interested in learning more about him and how he kind of rose to power, and I felt like the book actually did a good job of tying up loose ends and answering questions about, how the Hunger Games even came to be, and how like the technology, how far the technology has come from that time period to like, the Hunger Games setting that we're all familiar with today. So yeah, it was great. This book that I would like to reread again for the first time is a horror book, and it is The Long Walk by Stephen King. I'm gonna try my best to hold this without the glare hitting the book, but I actually read this year, and this is the first Stephen King novel that I ever read, and I'm really happy that I did choose this one, because this is a psychological dystopian horror novel. You can see a pattern here, but I thought this was a phenomenal book. It was truly heartbreaking and so like emotionally taxing, but I still loved it, and I love the story for what it was. So this book actually follows 100 boys who participate in this event known as the Long Walk, and they are in a dystopian America, like I mentioned, but this event pretty much just follows, like I said, these 100 boys, and there can only be one left standing at the end. So the winner of this long walk gets something known as the prize, and the prize is essentially anything their heart desires. And so you start to see a group of boys that Stephen King focuses on in this book, and kind of like, you get to know them, and you get to form actual connections and bonds with them, and you get to see the other characters forming bonds with each other while they're on this agonizing journey. So the whole purpose of this is also that if they trip, if they stop, if they stumble, or if they fall below the like speed limit or like the walking limit, they get 3 warnings, and after the 3rd warning they die. So there really can only be one winner at the end of all of this, and this book really does some shit to your psyche. That's what I'm trying to say. I definitely see why this is like a psychological horror, because you also start to see characters descending into madness, and it's so wild to see how they all started off, of course, you know, able-bodied and fine, to just deteriorating very quickly. Very scary stuff. And the fact that Stephen King was able to turn walking, one of the most mundane things of all time, into something so horrifying and so like jarring, it's crazy how good his writing style is. Like, such good writing style. Yes, he goes off on tangents. Yes, he goes into detail about things that maybe he shouldn't or doesn't need to, but like that's what I think that's what makes Stephen King. Like, that's just him. And I honestly enjoyed it, and if I didn't like it, then I just skipped past it. Like, I didn't get mad about it, but because I knew that going into the story. But anyways, I love this. I actually read this on my iPad, and I found this version on Depop, and this was the version that I wanted. So this is, I think, from 1992, and I just think that this is beautiful. I love the blue, and I love like this little mass paperback version, and it just has like a skull here on this fence post, and then of course it has like a road for the long walk symbolizing that, and then it has like, you know, the sun, so like dawn coming up. I just feel like this looks really creepy, really cool. It reminds me of like when you wake up and it's like daylight savings time. Like, that's what it's giving me. But yes, really love this. It also has a huge portrait of Stephen King on the back here, which, like, you know, these mass paperbacks and these books back then used to do. So yeah, love this story. Definitely recommend picking this up if you're into psychological horror books or dystopian novels of any kind. So the next book that I would like to reread again is No Exit by Taylor Adams, and this was one of the best, if not the best, thriller I've ever read. I'm just saying it now. Like, a lot of people love this book, and rightfully so, because it is so action-packed, it's so intense, it's anxiety-inducing, nail-biting, everything you can think of. This book has it all. So on the back here it says 13 hours, 4 strangers, 1 missing child, no exit. She knows her odds, she'll fight anyway. And perfect synopsis and like type of the book. So to give a like more quickly in-depth one, this book does follow our main character named Darby Thorne, and Darby is actually a college student, and she is trying to make her way back to her hometown because her mother is sick, and she's of course trying to, you know, see her mother. And while she's driving back, she is stuck in the snowstorm and her car isn't the best, so she decides to stop and pull over at this rest stop. And when she walks inside, she notices there are, I think, 4 people in the rest stop, and once she goes to the bathroom and everything like that, she comes back outside to get some air, and she recognizes or realizes that there is a little girl trapped in a cage in the trunk of one of these people's cars. So Darby has to figure out how she is going to make it out of the situation alive, as well as saving this little girl, and the story pretty much takes off from there. So you learn early on who like the antagonist is and who the villain is, so it doesn't really focus on like that whole reveal. It really focuses on like the aftermath of it. So like, again, how is Darby going to get herself and this little girl out of this crazy and scary and terrifying situation? And so, like I said, it's very anxiety inducing. It is a very fast-paced thriller, has you like on the edge of your seat. I finished this in one night, and I like closed the book, and I was actually very scared to go to sleep. Like, I've never been that way with a book before. Movies, yes. TV shows, yep, but never a book. So Taylor Adams delivered, and he did what he had to do on this book. I wish I could go back and read this again for the first time, because it was so good. It had the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Like, everything about this book was just, oh, it was so good. And I don't know why this isn't a movie yet or like a show. I definitely need Netflix to like hurry up and put this into production, because this was so good, and I feel like this would do so well in like a movie type of situation. Like, oh my gosh, I can't. But yes, definitely pick up No Exit if you haven't read it. Like, I know a lot of booktubers talk about this one, but like, it's deserved. Like, this will really have you just like, what the hell? And this has all of my fears, not all, but it has a lot of my fears wrapped up into this. So like, isolation trope, you know, being stranded in the middle of a blizzard, not having a way to get out, like all of that is just so scary, and I think Taylor Adams executed this very well. So the next book that I would like to reread again for the first time is, of course, It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. So this is a romance book, and this does follow 2 characters, one named Piper and one named Brendan. So starting with Piper, Piper is actually a very like high maintenance woman. She is accustomed to the finer things in life. She is very wealthy, and she's also a social media influencer, so she does have a platform, and she doesn't really like value or appreciate like, you know, the worth of $1 essentially, and she gets herself into some trouble. And because of that, and because of just, you know, again, her not really understanding like the concept of money and all that stuff, and like how it feels to work to get like, you know, your own money, her stepdad is really fed up with her, and he decides to send her to this remote like rural town that her biological father grew up in. And this town is known for like crab fishing, and just like, you know, real, like I said, like local, homey, like rural type of stuff. So Piper gets sent there, and her sister Hannah actually joins her on this journey. And then on the flip side, you have the male protagonist. His name is Brendan, and Brendan is the top dog in this town. Like, everyone respects Brendan, everyone really likes Brendan. Brendan is like the top like crab like fisherman there, so he has his own crew, his own ship, and like I said, he like wrangles like crabs when he goes out to sea with his crew, and like they sell them and all of this type of stuff. So he does not like change. He is very by the book. He has a routine, like that is just Brendan. He's very like boom boom boom, like type A, you know. So you can only imagine how he feels when Piper and Hannah stroll into town, and they are like, you know, they can't stand each other. It is a classic enemies to lovers story, and yes, the story pretty much takes off from there, following them falling in love and, you know, being open up to new experiences and to different people. So I genuinely love this book. It is my favorite romance book of this year, and I definitely want to say it is in my top 5, top 3, to be honest. I know I talk about this book all the time in my videos, and it's because it deserves it. Like, Tessa Bailey snapped with this book, and I just loved it. I loved Piper's character. She was so charming, so charismatic, and so kind. And I really like how Tessa Bailey made Piper's character. Like I said, she is very high maintenance and very accustomed to the finer things in life. And I feel like a lot of the times when people write high maintenance women characters, they often bash them. They either make the other characters bash them and make them feel bad about themselves, or they just make the character themselves feel bad about themselves. So of course my camera died, but going back to what I was saying about Piper, yes, I really like how Tessa Bailey wrote her character and didn't make other characters or make Piper feel bad about herself because she was high maintenance. And then Brendan, I didn't really care for him to be in the beginning. I really was sitting there like kind of, you know, pondering and wondering, like, am I really supposed to root for this guy? But of course, you know, towards the middle and the end of the book, he really started to open up more, and he started to really change, and you could tell that he really just genuinely loved Piper. I also thought Tessa Bailey did a really great job at just not making the story focus on the romance between Piper and Brendan, but it also focuses on other real world themes. So it focuses on grief and the loss and the death of a parent, as well as working through that grief, and also working through loneliness and isolation, and just, you know, wanting to live a life that you're proud of, and also be proud of yourself, and not only go after like the surface level things in life. So I just really like that Tessa Bailey does that in her romance books, and I think a lot of romance authors do that now, where they don't only focus on like the fluff, and that's fine. I love books and romance books that are just like fluffy. Like, sometimes we just need those, but I'm glad that like a lot of these books now that are coming out really do focus on other stuff, and there are other elements that drive the plot, not just the romance. So yes, reading this the first time, it was just a great experience. I fell in love with the characters, I fell in love with the writing, and I also loved the steamy scenes. The smut in here was really good. But yes, this made me a big fan of Tessa Bailey, so I want to read anything that she writes from now on. So the next book that I would love to reread again for the first time is The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. So this is actually the first Jasmine Guillory book that I've ever read, and I feel like this is the first book that many people read by her, and this book was just phenomenal. Like, I loved it so much. So this story does follow a black woman and a white man. The black woman's name is Alexa, the white man's name is, I think, Andrew, or Drew for short, and I forget exactly like how they end up like meeting each other, but I think Drew and Alexa actually meet in an elevator, and Drew is like in need of a date for a wedding that he's attending, and somehow him and Alexa strike up a conversation, and Alexa agrees to go with him, and then the story pretty much takes off from there. So it does involve fake dating, it involves, you know, just all of that type of stuff, and I just loved this book when it first came out. I thought it was so cute, and it definitely sparked my interest in reading more romance books again, because at that time I wasn't really reading for fun, just because I was super busy with like school and everything. But that book, I picked it up off of a whim, I think at Target, and I fell in love with it, and I continued to read like all of the books in that Wedding Date series. So The Proposal, I think, is the next book. Then you have The Wedding, I think, Party with Maddie and Theo, etc. So yeah, I just really wish I could go back in time and reread this again, because like I said, it was just so cute and it was so wholesome. I remember for The Wedding Date, I remember I just like fell in love with like Alexa and Drew, both like individually but also like collectively. I thought they were a great pair. I remember just reading it and just like standing them so hard, and you could tell Drew was just so lovesick over Alexa, and Alexa was trying to act like she wasn't lovesick over him, but she was, and I just loved it. The character development there was just great, and I felt like they were actually very developed, which sometimes you don't get enough in romance stories. So I just really appreciated how Jasmine wrote the characters, and you know, it was cool to also get a glimpse into an interracial relationship such as Alexa and Drew. So yeah, I just really enjoyed it. Honestly, really just made me like Jasmine Guillory's writing style and how she writes romance books. And I just remember when that came out, it like put her on the map, and everybody was talking about her in that book, and she deserves it, because I think she's still like a really great contemporary romance writer. I know we have a lot of other people out now, and I know some people don't feel that way about Jasmine's books, but I do. I've always been a fan. The Proposal, which is the second book in the series, is like my other favorite. So yeah, yeah, I just loved it. But yes, The Wedding Date, if you have not read it, I definitely recommend picking that up too. I recommend picking up all of these books, of course, but yes, if you're into romance, pick up something at least from Jasmine Guillory, because she is just so important, I feel like, to the contemporary romance genre, especially as a Black author. She's just great, so definitely recommend giving her work a try if you haven't already. The next book that I would like to reread again for the first time is a nonfiction read, and it is In the Country We Love, My Family Divided by Diane Guerrero. And this is a memoir written by Diane Guerrero, and for those of you who do not know, Diane is an actress, but she was on the show Orange is the New Black. She played Maritza, if you ever watched that show, and I absolutely love Diane Guerrero, and I just loved her like acting chops in that show. But when I found out that she came out with this memoir years ago, I knew that I had to read this, and this pretty much just follows her childhood and how she broke into the entertainment industry, but also how the experiences of her troubling childhood honestly shaped her into the woman that she is today. So Diane is the product of two, at the time, undocumented immigrant parents. Her entire family was actually undocumented. Besides Diane, she was born in the United States, and so her childhood was just filled with a lot of nerves and a lot of uncertainty and anxiety. And Diane really talks about how her family was constantly living in fear because they didn't know if and when ICE would show up at their door and deport her entire family. They were, of course, trying to do their best in terms of laying low and not really drawing attention to themselves, but of course, you know, something happened and her family unfortunately ended up getting deported back to Colombia. And Diane pretty much just talks about how she had to grow up, you know, without her family there, like physically there, and how it was just very hard on her. And then of course how she really wanted to get into acting and how she didn't know she was going to do that. It was just, this memoir was just beautiful. It was heartbreaking and it was so sad, and I actually cried at certain chapters. I did cry because I felt for her, I raged for her, and especially when she was talking, you know, from the standpoint of her childhood, I just felt so bad for her as a child to go through something like this. Even though I keep saying that this novel is like really heartbreaking, it's still an insightful and important read, and I felt like I learned so much about just what it is like, or what it might be like to be in an environment where, you know, you're either an undocumented immigrant yourself, or where your parents are, or your entire family is. And I just think Diane did a really great job at giving a voice to the voiceless and really just, you know, sharing her experience and being super vulnerable and open and transparent about what it was like growing up in this type of environment. I just felt, like I said, so bad for her, and I was on the edge of my seat and like biting my nails the entire time when I was like reading this book. It was just, it was so sad. That's all I can say, but it was so good. It was so good. One of my favorite nonfiction reads ever, honestly. Like, this is definitely my all-time favorite list. But Diane also even has pictures in here, like, to give it a personal touch, which I really appreciated. I love when people do that in their memoirs, and I just think that makes it, like I said, just more personal. So quintessential like 2000s like photos that she has in here, and I love it. She has photos with her family when she was younger, and yeah, this is her when she was first born. So I just think that this is, like I said, a very insightful read, very powerful, and I definitely think that this should probably be included in like curriculums and stuff, because I don't know, man, I don't know, it really opened my eyes and just gave me a lot more perspective, honestly. And yeah, so Diane also updated this in 2017, because this was published in 2016, but she did update this in 2017 with new information that talks about, you know, President Donald Trump's, you know, immigration reform policy and all of that type of stuff. So she does have call to action, like, you know, messages in here asking people to just support undocumented immigrants during that time. So yeah, either way, definitely recommend picking this book up, and I would love to reread this again for the first time, just because learning new things and just learning introspective things and just, you know, things that I personally did not go through myself, it's so eye-opening. So yes, loved this book a lot. All right, y'all, we have one more book left, and it is To Selena with Love by Chris Perez. And so this story is actually a book that pretty much talks about what Selena was like on and off the stage, and pretty much like what her relationship was with her husband Chris, who wrote this book. So for those of you who do not know, I will quickly say that Selena Quintanilla Perez was a Mexican-American singer, and she mainly sung Tejano music, but she also focused on pop. She also did a little bit of rap. She was pretty much a jack or Jill of all trades. She could dance, she could sing. She also had her own clothing line. So Selena was a trailblazer. She was shattering glass ceilings. Tejano music at the time was heavily dominated by men. So for Selena to come in there and just pretty much shake up the entire industry and win awards and, you know, become like, you know, critically acclaimed by like the Grammys and all that type of stuff, like, it was a huge deal, especially because she is Latinx. So she, like I said, just is an inspiration for so many people. And unfortunately, on March 31st, 1995, she was murdered by someone she trusted, the president of her fan club, actually. And it was, of course, very devastating for all of her fans, as well as her family, her friends, and of course, Chris, her husband. So this book was written in 2012, so years after, you know, Selena passed away. And I just really appreciate, one, Chris for writing this, because he was so candid, so raw, and so open and vulnerable in this story. And he didn't have to share any of this with us. He didn't. And I really appreciate him for doing that. I'm like such a huge like Chris Perez stan. Like I love him. But this book was absolutely beautiful, but it was also heartbreaking, and I cried. Besides In the Country We Love, this is the only other book that has made me cry. Like, oh my goodness. So I'm a huge Selena fan, if you couldn't tell already, and I just feel like this is the perfect like gift for the ultimate Selena fan. And if you're just interested in her in general, or her life, or wanting to know more about her, I definitely recommend picking this up. It is so beautiful. There's also pictures in here. Chris added so many personal touches in here, which again, I really appreciate. There's also, I think these are deckled edges, so if you're into that too, you can get that as well. But yes, there are like photos of her in here. So this is actually like a campaign photo shoot. I think this was back, I think in 1995, when she worked with the company called Agree Shampoo. They're not even around anymore, but this is from that photo shoot. And then you also just have pictures of her and Chris in here, as well as just like pictures of her standalone. This is one of my favorite photos of them. The way that Chris looks at her is just absolutely gorgeous. And there's just so many good pictures in here. This is them performing on stage at a concert, because Chris was her guitarist, and of course Selena was the lead singer of their band. And just like absolutely stunning woman. Like, look at that face card. Like, oh my goodness, love her. So yes, this book, so sad, so beautiful, but I definitely recommend picking it up again if you are the ultimate Selena fan. And I just want to quickly read this sentence in here, because when I read this, I knew that I was going to like love this story, of course. This is in the prologue, but right here it says, if a fortune teller had told me back when I was 20 years old that falling in love with Selena would end in me losing her the way that I did, would I still have married her? Absolutely. For as long as I live, the day Selena died, March 31st, 1995, will always be a painful day. But I would do it all over again in a heartbeat for Selena. And he also writes in here an ode to her, and it says, Selena, I'm still dreaming of you. And it's so beautiful. And for those of you who do not know, Dreaming of You is actually a song that Selena sung, and it was on her final album, her English album, and it's like one of her most like best-selling songs to date. So like it's up there with Como la Flor and like Bitty Bitty Bum Bum. So yeah, but absolutely love this book. I can't say enough great things about it. All right, y'all, and those are all of the books that I wish I could reread again for the first time. I just remember all of the experiences I had when I first read them, and I remember, you know, exactly where I was when I finished them and when I closed the chapter on all of those books. It was a great time. It was a great time. I wish I could go back, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know what books you would like to read again for the first time. Let me know if you read any of these books that I have read, and if you would read them again, or if you love them. Just let me know. I love talking about books with you guys, and I just love talking to you guys in general. So yeah, leave your comments down below. Make sure you subscribe, and make sure you follow me on my Bookstagram. That will be you know, shown at the end of the video here, and it will also be in my description box below. So please follow me. I would appreciate it. Anyways, I hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye.